Welcome to the third episode of You're All Doomed, the podcast that stomps through Friday the 13th, the final chapter, in 13-minute chunks. I'm backpacking drifter Greg.
I am Brian.
This segment begins with two Belinda Carlisle clones on 10 speeds and ends with a group of people shotgunning beers, poorly. So yeah, the twins have arrived. We are introduced to Tina and Terry.
Don't ask me to keep them apart.
No, it's impossible. But I am thrilled that we have the first Tina of the series, which for some reason I've always associated that name with this series. I feel like they pop up in almost every movie, but I was surprised that it took us this long to get to the first Tina.
I thought you were going to say that you always associate the name Tina with Family Ties, because that's the only thing that I can think of with Tina Yothers.
Tina Yothers. But yeah, they're introduced to the group, and my favorite element of this scene is that Doug has his hands in his pockets like he's trying to warm up his balls. He's wearing this like golf shirt that's stuffed into his short shorts, and then his hands are in his pockets. So yeah, it's classic.
While he's juggling his balls, he does ask the twins how far it is to Crystal Point, which got me wondering, is it too soon for them to have renamed the area after the events that happened at Crystal Lake? Are they trying to do like a rebranding by calling it Crystal Point? Or is maybe Crystal Point a specific area within Crystal Lake? Or is Crystal Point a larger, area? I don't know, but it was the first time we'd heard it described this way.
True. I mean, I think that it's too soon from the events of parts 2 forward for them to have renamed the area.
That's true, and they called it Crystal Lake there.
So, unless they did something after the very first movie, which we know was 5 years ago from this date. But yeah, I suspect that Crystal Point is just like a little plot of land that's on Crystal Lake.
After Paul asks this, the twins say that's where they're going, but it's a long walk.
Which is an interesting detail that'll come up later. But
yeah. But they're on the bikes, or at least the twins are on the bike, so they don't care. And Ted insists that even though it is a long walk, he can handle it. But Sarah isn't so certain about that, and she decides to go back and get the car. And Doug, this is kind of the first time that we see that Doug might have a little bit of a thing for Sarah, because he offers to go back with her to get the car, but Sarah isn't interested, and she's like, no, I'm good. I'll just go by myself.
Yeah, so she marches on back to the car, but almost immediately kind of begins getting unsettled. The wilderness here is nice and creepy, so it's some excellent location scouting, and she's out there by herself, and even though it's still broad daylight, she seems a little bit spooked by being out in the woods by herself.
We also don't know how long they've been walking up to this point, so they could be. I don't feel like they're 5 minutes from the house. I feel like they have been walking for a while, because otherwise they would have all just gone back and jumped in the car. But yeah, she shows a little bit of bravery by, saying that she's just going to go back and, get the car by herself.
We get kind of another unnecessary jump scare where, she's walking backwards because she's fearing that someone is behind her, but she bumps into a branch, and we're supposed to be terrified by that.
The next scene we see is them at the lake shore, which we can presume is the Crystal Point that they were looking for. They're all kind of gathered around the lake, and Tina or Terry, I have no idea which one, jumps on the lamest rope swing I've ever seen in my life. She barely even gets enough air to clear the water. And so as soon as she jumps on it, she immediately hits the water.
And immediately upon hitting the water, the twins begin stripping. So it's time for some skinny dipping, and the whole gang starts disrobing.
Yeah, we see Sarah walking away in the background while all these people are taking their clothes off and jumping in the lake. So we at least know that she made it back with the car. We didn't actually see that happen, but she is just kind of like wandering off by herself.
And remaining clothed, so she's obviously a little bit uncomfortable by the nakedness that's going on around her. Ted, on the other hand, is super excited by the fact that he might be skinny dipping with some nice-looking twins.
This is when the Jarvis family truckster pulls up next to the gang's station wagon. I'm not going to leave you in suspense too long, but it's a 1970 Dodge Polara. The 1970 model received new front and rear styling that included a bumper that wrapped around the grille and the headlights, Greg. The
Snazzy.
the name Polara is a reference to the Polaris star. It was a marketing attempt to appeal to the excitement surrounding the space race during the early 1960s.
So the car is barely turned off before the dog jumps
What's
out of
his
the...
name again?
I think it's Gary. Is it?
No, it's
Gus?
Gordon. Gordon, that's his name.
How do you know that?
Because Tommy has said it 11 times so far.
Okay, we have a drinking game then. Gordon obviously wants to see some breasts because he is out of that car and down to the water like a shot. Where everyone is still rope swinging, even though they're naked. I can't think of anything less comfortable than skinny dipping on a rope swing. I mean, even the abrasion from the rope.
Yeah,
but
the burns you're going to get are going to be precarious, to say the least.
Yeah, and then like the grimy lake water rushing up your sphincter or your vagina as you enter the water. Like, I would never do that.
It's interesting to note here that Sarah is nowhere to be found. She's an odd duck. She's definitely wanting to be around these people, but it goes back to what you were saying about how are these people friends? Because as of yet, it doesn't seem like Sarah is really having fun or wanting to partake in the things that the group is taking part in, because everyone's swimming, skinny dipping, and she just disappears. She just doesn't want any part of it.
Yeah, it turns out that she's over like on a nearby dock reading or writing poetry or something, and Sam congenially paddles over to see if she can coax her friend into the water.
Yeah, Sam's trying pretty hard to get Sarah to go swimming, and Sarah wants nothing of it. And so Sam decides to play a game where she said she's going to go underwater until Sarah jumps in. And so Sam does that. She goes underwater, and a good chunk of time, like maybe 30 seconds passes, and Sam hasn't come up yet. And so now, Sarah's starting to get a little freaked out, and she's like calling out her name, and then like really freaky, Sam's body kind of floats face up from underneath the dock.
Yeah.
And, motionless with her eyes open, and it's just really creepy. And, Sarah screams, and she, reaches into the water to try to pull Sarah out. And, but Sam grabs her and pulls her into the lake, and Sarah does not think it's very funny.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a nasty prank, but I can see why Sarah would be a little bit upset, even though Sam was just trying to, break the ice a little bit and get her involved in the swimming.
I thought it was pretty effective. I mean, if you had done something like that for me, I'm like, oh, maybe he's really in trouble. And
Seriously, Sam was definitely committed to that prank.
we see a quick shot of the Jarvis family car driving away.
Yeah, they were invited to join the skinny dipping, but Trish covered Tommy's eyes and kind of declined immediately. So I'm not even sure why the Jarvises showed up at Crystal Point.
Right. They showed up. They were there for about 2 seconds, and then they turned around and left. So I have no idea where they were going. But Tommy makes a comment about all the naked girls that he saw, and he goes, "Some pack of patootsies, huh?" Which is not a word I've ever heard before, and I'm not even really certain what patootsies is describing. Is he talking about the girls? Is he talking about body parts? I just don't know what he was talking about.
I'm guessing boobs, but yeah.
Probably,
it's
yeah.
hard to say for sure. And Trish is sort of annoyed / disgusted by her pervy little brother.
And, of course, it's a car in a horror movie, so what happens is they're driving, the car breaks down on the side of the road. So Tommy pops the hood and takes, a look at the engine for about 3 seconds and decides that he needs a screwdriver, which is in the trunk.
So Tommy is absorbed with his work under the hood, and we see some legs approaching, wearing gray pants and black shoes. While Tommy has Trish try the engine and it doesn't start, and he's fiddling away, and then almost out of nowhere, this person appears from behind Tommy, startling him, and just awkwardly saying, "Hi, I'm Rob Dyer."
Yeah, it's a very abrupt introduction. He's carrying a absolutely enormous backpack, and he produces a knife, and within about 5 seconds is able to get the car started with a knife. When I first saw that, I thought it was a little peculiar that you're able to fix an engine with a knife. But then I realized that Tommy is 10 years old, and who knows how long his father hasn't been around. So maybe there's nothing wrong with the engine at all. It was just kind of like a little loose screw or something, and Tommy didn't know what he was looking at, but this Rob guy comes in and he's like, doop, 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 with his knife and fixes it.
Yeah, it seems like it was some sort of maybe electrical connection or something, because Rob got a spark and that allowed the ignition to kick over. Interestingly, Rob is wearing dark hiking pants and brown hiking boots. So the pair of legs that we saw moments ago did not belong to Rob. So that makes me think that Jason actually has been watching all of this unfold and may have intended to strike before Rob appeared.
Oh, I didn't notice that, but that's interesting. So it was like 2 cutaway shots of maybe, the first shot is Jason watching, and then before he could interfere, Rob shows up, and then it's like,
right,
interesting.
Having helped them restart the car, they offer him a ride to wherever it is that he's going. So he graciously accepts, but seems awfully creepy at first. He's asking if there are any kids around, maybe vacationers, if they're there by themselves. He's asking kind of oddly sinister questions, especially for having just met these 2 young people and hitchhiking a ride with them.
Yeah, and Tommy's immediately pretty skeptical about what Rob is doing there. And Rob says that he's there hunting bear, and Tommy's immediately, you can see him kind of formulating it in his head. He's like, there's no bears around here. What are you doing? So there's suspicion from, the word go.
Although Tommy quickly changes his opinion, because no sooner did they pull up back at home and barely get out of the car when Tommy grabs Rob by the arm and says, "Come on, I've got something real neat to show you up in my room."
Which could be the most horrifying thing said in these movies yet.
If I were Rob, I'd be like, no thanks, kid, unless a lawyer can come along and document our visit to your bedroom. Tommy leads him inside past Mrs. Jarvis, who is startled to see a strange man now in her home being led upstairs by her 12-year-old son.
She doesn't seem that concerned by it. She's just like, oh, there's Tommy leading a strange man into his bedroom again.
Yeah, I suppose she should be more alarmed than she is, but it definitely caught her by surprise.
I did notice that Mrs. Jarvis was on the couch knitting. Do you happen to know what pattern that is, Greg?
No, I don't, but thank you for asking.
I thought it was weird that they offered Rob a ride and then went to the Jarvis house. That seems a lot more convenient for the Jarvis family than it does for Rob, because where was he going? Where was he trying to get to? But it definitely wasn't the Jarvis house with, his final destination. So
I wonder if Trish maybe immediately had kind of designs on like, oh, maybe we'll offer him a ride. We'll drive him back to the house, ask him to stay for some lemonade, and And
then once Tommy's done taking him to his bedroom, I'll take him to mine.
Exactly. I mean, Rob's a nice looking enough dude, so I could see her being intrigued right away. Up in Tommy's bedroom, Rob sees a massive collection of supposedly custom monster masks, horror masks, and is a little overly impressed, I would say, by the craftsmanship. I mean, it's all cool stuff, but he's so awestruck, it's as though he can't comprehend how anyone would conceive of these designs.
I couldn't tell if he was impressed or just trying to calculate the fastest way out of the house.
That's true. He might just be really alarmed by this weird kid who's dragged him upstairs. But as he's gazing at these masks, this strange-looking tentacle kind of creeps around from behind him and then wraps around his neck, and he's startled and turns around, and it's this little animatronic puppet arm that Tommy has supposedly built as some sort of demon claw. Tommy then shows Rob another animatronic puppet of a monster head with articulated eyes and mouth movements and stuff, and it feels to me like this is just a demo reel for Tom Savini to get a gig on a monster movie after this flick is done with. It's certainly advanced beyond what a 12-year-old kid could build out in the middle of nowhere in his bedroom. But, cool. It's a chance for the makeup wizard to show off what he's capable of.
Back at the party house, Paul and Sam are making out on the stairs, and Ted is sitting on the couch drinking beer. Crispin Glover, who... his character's name is Jimbo. Everyone calls him Jimbo. He puts a record on, and it's a heavy metal song called "Love Is a Lie" by a band called Lion.
Yeah, when I heard him put this record on, I immediately thought, God, that sounds like something that belongs on the Transformers the movie soundtrack. And lo and behold, it is indeed by Lion, who sang the title track for that very movie. So I have to laugh when I found out that it's in fact the same band.
They also performed 2 songs on the Charlie Sheen flick, The Wraith.
The Wraith, yeah. They were active from 1983 through 1989. This was their debut song, but they unfortunately disbanded when the drummer broke his neck. So they're not still around in this form, but they do have some noteworthy songs to their catalog.
So this very aggressive heavy metal song is playing, and Jimbo asks Tina Terry, I have no idea, to dance, and she reluctantly agrees. Tina or Terry starts dancing in a pretty typical kind of like cheesy 80s style, but I can't even begin to describe what Jimbo is doing here.
Yeah, it's this weird kind of alt thrash mosh pit
convulsions,
twitch,
and jerky movements, and
almost like some sort of interpretive dance.
Yeah, and Tina Orteri doesn't really know how to respond, so she just continues to do her own little dance. But yeah, Jimbo is definitely in his own little world here.
I mean, it's probably one of the most memorable scenes from this movie. I mean, there are clips of it all over the internet, and supposedly Crispin Glover kind of improvised it, on the set in the moment. It's awkward and hilarious, but also utterly fascinating and just perfect for the character.
Yeah, you can't take your eyes off of them. You're just like, what is happening here?
Over on the sofa, Ted is trying to make his move with Tina, Terry, whichever one is left over, and coming on a little strong, to say the least, but also trying to get her to like smooch with his teddy bear. It's just weird.
Yeah, and it continues to prove that Crispin Glover has more moves than Ted does, and Ted's the one that's dishing out all of the
advice,
the attacks.
Yeah.
So Ted clearly has no game with the girls. One thing I noticed, though, is, again, Sarah is nowhere to be found. Everyone is kind of like paired up, or at least trying to pair up, but Sarah's just not there. So, again, what is she doing there that weekend?
Yeah, she definitely doesn't seem super comfortable, almost as though maybe she was dragged along by Sam just so that Sam wasn't going to be going away with a bunch of random dudes. So, yeah, I feel a little bit bad for her, but I also think that she could probably loosen up. Paul takes a short break from dancing with Sam to go over and get a beverage when one of the twins comes over and starts flirting with him a little bit. Sam immediately makes her presence known, and Paul kind of sheepishly turns back to his girlfriend and then, turns his cap to the side and goes into a Three Stooges bit, which
certainly,
it seems really weird and nerdy, but okay.
Jimbo is striking out with Tina Orteri, and he heads into the kitchen to kind of, explain what's going on with Ted, and Ted tells Jimbo to quit being such a dead fuck, and he goes through that whole routine again. And
at which point Ted also sticks his hand through the fly of his pants with like a limp-wristed gesture indicating that Jimbo might have a flaccid penis or something, and it's just really obnoxious and gross, and Jimbo is rightly offended by that, but then says something that doesn't exactly endear me to him. He says that Ted's got the hot one of the twins, and that's just a really shitty thing to say. And they're identical, so it's not even accurate. I don't get what he's going for there.
Yeah, and it seemed more like something Ted would say, because Jimbo, at least to this point, has made it sound like he's a pretty nice guy. Maybe he's just a little misunderstood because he's weird, but he doesn't seem like he's an asshole, whereas Ted's the one that's, yelling
Agreed.
woof woof at the hitchhiker, and like he would be the one that would be saying something kind of, mean-spirited like that. So it's a little strange to hear that coming from Jimbo.
Yeah, agreed. And, made even worse by the fact that one of the twins actually overhears him say this and catches Ted with his hand sticking out of his pants, which is, rightly embarrassing.
We then see everyone except Jimmy. Even Sarah is there, which is weird, and she suddenly appears to be having a really good time. But everyone shows up except Jimmy back in the living room, where it looks like the party's getting started and they're, maybe getting ready to shotgun some beers or something. And that's where this chunk ends.
Yeah, unfortunately, there were no deaths in this segment except for maybe some dignity. It was kind of slow, but the fact that we learned that Lion is behind Jimbo's famous dance
Makes it all worth it.
makes it all worthwhile.
Well, until next week, I have been Brian,
I've been Greg.
and you are all doomed.